Today on Upfront, the inauguration of America's 45th president.
I think there's going to be a lot of energy and excitement.
Republican Congressman Sean Duffy on the ceremony, Republican priorities, and repealing Obamacare. Then, state Democrats in disarray. After a dismal election cycle, we asked party leader Martha Lanning how she plans to get her party back on track. And the governor all in on improving Wisconsin's workforce. What does that mean if you're underemployed or unemployed?
Covering the issues important to Wisconsin. This is Up Front with Mike Goucher.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Up Front. This week, a change in command. Friday, Donald Trump will be sworn in as the 45th president of the United States. Inauguration planners say his message will be one of unity, and he's sticking with his campaign slogan, Make America Great Again. He's expected to ride to the ceremony with President Obama. Wisconsin Congressman Sean Duffy will be there. He is part of Trump's transition team, and he's been a longtime supporter of the president-elect. And Congressman Duffy joins us now on the satellite from Washington. Let's talk about the week ahead. Donald Trump's inauguration, the swearing-in ceremony. You've been very bullish about a Trump presidency, but I got to ask you, what is the biggest challenge you think he's going to face when he takes office?
Well, not only have I been bullish on the Trump presidency, the markets have as well. And it's, I think, the idea that you're going to have a businessman who understands taxes and rules and regulations, not that they're bad, but if you have too much of them, how it impacts our ability in America to do business and compete globally. And so, you know, having Mr. Trump as a transition from Mr. Obama as a former community organizer, never really having been a business guy, I think is what people are excited about. And so looking forward to the week ahead, obviously we have the inauguration of our president-elect, Mr. Trump. I think there's going to be a lot of energy and excitement around that day, as there is every 4 years for Inauguration Day. But I think it's going to break out, though, into a conversation around policy and politics. You know, what priorities are first? You know, health care, as you've heard from Mr. Trump and from the House, is a priority. We see, you know, the promises that were made in health care, that the premiums were going to go down by $2,500 a year for a family of four. And if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. And if you like your health care plan, you can keep it. All those promises were false. Premiums and deductibles are all increasing. So we need to make sure we get health care right. Tax reform is a top priority as well for us. Border security, making sure we secure the southern border. So those who come into the country come in with the permission and consent of the American people. A pretty rigorous agenda, but I think it's one that we have American buy-in for and we can get done.
Let me ask you about one of the things you just mentioned, the repeal of Obamacare. The wheels are already in motion, clearly, to do that. But can you assure people in your district, a number of whom are on Obamacare, can you assure them that there's not going to be a gap, that they're not going to be caught in the lurch from the time where Obamacare is repealed to the time where it is replaced?
So we got to be clear on what happens. This is like an aircraft carrier, healthcare. The plans for 2018 with the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare law are already written. They're getting approval from our states. It's going to be hard for us to change healthcare coverage plans for 2018 and so our effective date on the repeal, it can be a point in the future as we work on our replacement, as we work on those the following year plans that are signed up in 2018 but take effect in 2019. But there's other issues like the individual mandate and a lot of punishing taxes that have come from the Affordable Care Act that we can get rid of right now. And so, yeah, I feel very comfortable that the plan we come up with is going to make sure that there's a seamless transition in regard to health care, and no one is going to be left in the lurch. And by the way, Mike, we need to have an American conversation. I think whether you like Obamacare or not, people were frustrated that Nancy Pelosi said that you have to pass this law to find out what's in it. Health care is very personal for people. They want to have control of it. And so let's have a great American conversation that we might not all agree to, but we all have a say in, that'll give us this opportunity to come up with a better plan that reduces prices and puts you in control of your health care instead of a bureaucrat in Washington.
And briefly, though, you would concede it's tricky because if you remove the mandate, which I know a lot of Republicans like yourself do not like, but if you remove that, isn't it challenging to pay for coverage for pre-existing conditions, for example?
Well, in Wisconsin, we did it with our high-risk pools and did it pretty effectively. You know, 96% of Wisconsinites were covered through our high-risk pools and our insurance system. that other 5% that was left, 4% that was left, they were either, the invincibles who didn't want coverage, but also a small percent of those with pre-existing conditions who couldn't get coverage. So we can fix that Wisconsin model and actually, make it work. But what's going to be unique is if you want to be in Vermont and have a single payer system and try that model, or you want to try a different Wisconsin model that is, patient-centered, or, California or Colorado want to try different models, we're going to give some more control to our states on how we run healthcare, which is a really good thing, I think.
Congressman, let me ask you about some news of the past week. You saw and heard these reports that suggested that the intelligence officials in this country were investigating unsubstantiated, unverified claims that Russia had some information on the president-elect, personal or financial, that could put him in a compromising position potentially. You've heard those reports, those stories. Does any of that concern you as he is about to take office?
Well, let me tell you what does concern me. Is that with our intelligence community, which is so important to our security and our defenses, making sure it functions well, when that intelligence community is actually used for political purposes to leak information to the press, that undermines their credibility and frankly undermines our system of government and politics. And when the intelligence community comes out with reports that are unsubstantiated, that the president is getting briefed on and Mr. Trump is getting briefed on, but the press is talking about it to lend credence to the idea that they could have compromising information. Listen, this is serious stuff. And it's important that we have the utmost faith in the intelligence community, which means they don't leak. They get good intelligence. They brief the appropriate congressional committees and presidents so we can make the right decisions. But if they use that for political purposes and political gain, all of a sudden you have a war with the intelligence community and it becomes political, it's not trusted, and that diminishes American security and safety today and down the road as we try to navigate some really challenging threats in the world.
Speaking of challenging threats, do you have any concern at all that the president-elect seems too friendly or too complimentary towards Russia or Vladimir Putin?
Well, I think Vladimir Putin is not a good guy. I don't think he's a friend of America. Now, Mr. Trump has taken a different position that he wants to start off with a friendly relationship that might continue where we can find spaces to work with Russia, but we'll have disagreements in other spaces. Listen, this is a guy, though, who, invaded the country of Georgia, took Crimea, is now messing with Ukraine. He's in Syria. He's trying to undermine, I think, the European Union. This is not a good man, and I don't think we should kid ourselves about who he is and what his intentions are. So I've publicly had disagreements with Mr. Trump about what Russia is and what risks it poses to the United States of America. Now, listen, I'm not elected the president. I don't know if he has some grand plan, like he wants to partner with Russia on the issue of ISIS, and maybe push back against China and other global threats. I don't know where he's at. But from my view of the world, as a Wisconsin guy, I have grave concern about Mr. Putin and Russia.
And our conversation with Congressman Duffy will continue. Will he run for Senate in 2018? I'll ask him later in the show. First, the state of the state's Democrats. They failed to win Wisconsin for Hillary Clinton and lost seats in the legislature. Next on Up Front, the woman leading the party. How will they move forward? And
our biggest challenge is not creating jobs, but finding people to fill them.
The governor says it's his top priority in 2017, improving the state's workforce. We're talking about how he's going to do that with the Secretary of Workforce Development when Up Front continues.
Up Front with Mike Goucher, brought to you by the American Transmission Company.